Well, good evening, IFL Nation, and welcome to tonight's stream. We are back in our friendly confines in the lab, set for another great weekend of indoor football. It is 6 p.m. over here on the East Coast. A little bit late to the jump this weekend, but nonetheless, it is Wager Wednesday in the Indoor Football League. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy Friday evening schedule. I know it's the long weekend for several of us with Memorial Day on Monday, so happy Memorial Day to all those out there. For anybody military, past or active, thank you so much for your service. Greatly appreciate what you've done for this country. Um, on that note, for those of you who are new to the channel or new to the Indoor Football League, there's been a lot of news swirling around. So if you're just getting caught up in the action for the first time, I want to warmly welcome you aboard. My name is Alex Schuberth. I am the lead IFL contributor for a sports forum site called Sports Coast to Coast, which is a Pacific Northwest-based sports forum website that specializes specifically in the coverage of the Indoor Football League and its 14 member teams. Each week, our staff brings you all of the breaking news, up to date team rosters, game previews, game recaps once they're all said and done, and there's a whole lot of other great content there as well, even outside the IFL. So if you call yourself a sports junkie and or a passionate fan of the Indoor Football League, Sports Coast to Coast is a must go-to destination. I've linked the site below in the description. Check it out if you'd like. There you will also find the written version of my Wager Wednesday piece that I put together yesterday evening. So if you're not really the video type, there's the nice pen and paper or keyboard and computer, depending on how you look at it, maybe what times you're from. But in any event, that's there. And I say we get this show on the road. A little bit of a smoother operation being back here compared to on the road, because I've got the multi-screen setup here for pretty quick transitions, but be that as it may, here we are at week 11 in the 2026 season. We've got 10 weeks left to play before we reach the postseason in the Indoor Football League. So by the calendar front, we are exactly halfway through the campaign. So consider this the official kickoff to the second half. All right, before we get too deep into the week ahead, we're going to start things off by recapping the full 7-game slate that we had during week 10. We had a whole variety of action here, from interconference matchups to battles of top teams in the respective conferences. We had a team get their first win of the season, and in case you missed it, we had some games played inside a shopping mall. That's right. So we will recap each one of those in greater detail in just a couple minutes. We will add those results to our season-long stats so far. We will take a closer look at some of the noteworthy, eye-popping trends, both from a team perspective and league-wide. We will look at straights, parlays, our Mortal Mega Max record, and dive into all that fun statistical stuff as we always do on a weekly basis. For those of you who are interested to see, will a Wrangler win come first or will a Orlando Pirate under come first? Congratulations to those who stuck with Orlando overs. That streak is still a perfect 7-0 after last week's action. So once we do all of our reflecting and all of our recapping, we'll take a look at week 11. We've got 5 games on the docket, beginning with a matchup tonight, which we will be looking at 8 o'clock Eastern. So just a couple hours from now, we'll be kicking off that game. The final couple on Sunday will be the second half of the IFL Cup Showcase. That is out at American Dream in East Rutherford, New Jersey. So we'll talk about each one of those 5 games, come up with a 3-leg parlay of the week, which unfortunately our bid for a repeat came up just that 1 leg short. And again, it happened with the Green Bay Blizzard game. Seems to happen a lot this year. But in any event, let's dive in To our recaps, we started off with a standalone Friday contest, interconference battle between the Tucson Sugar Skulls and the Quad City Steamwheelers. These were two teams that were in pretty rough form entering this one. Quad City had lost each of their last 4 in a row, while Tucson had dropped each of their last 3. So a much needed win was out there for either team to get. After Tucson drew first blood in this one, Quad City had the momentum in the first half. They strung together 4 consecutive touchdown drives. They ended up taking a lead into the locker room. I believe it was 28-17, something along those lines. I can't remember exactly what it is, but in any event, Quad City was in very good shape. And then the second half came rolling around, and the Sugar Skulls chipped away. Taz Wilson finding a little bit more of a flow on offense for the Sugar Skulls, who ended up getting Brandon Mackey back after a multi-game injury absence. So a big boost for the Tucson rushing attack. But that got into form, and the defense came to play a little bit in that second half as well. In fact, they held Quad City out of the end zone on 3 straight possessions throughout that second half. Ended up tying the game 38 apiece, forcing a missed field goal from Quad City with about a minute to go. Tucson with the ball, with the opportunity to win the game, but the Steamwheelers said, not so fast. On a play that originated from Tucson's own 5-yard line, Taz Wilson gets sacked in the end zone for a safety. That play would prove to be the winner as the Steamwheelers get their season back on course with a 40-38 win. So we had to sweat out that minus 310 a little bit, but in the end, it got us through. And again, it was one of those ones where we saw the spread, we didn't like it, so we ate some juice, took the money line, and turned out to be the correct result. I mean, the other correct result would have been taking Tucson at plus 9.5 as well, but we had some concerns about their offense. Those concerns, at least for this past week, seem to be put on pause for now. For Saturday, we had 3 games on the slate, starting in San Antonio with the Gunslingers hosting the San Diego Strike Force, a potentially pivotal matchup in terms of the Western Conference playoff picture. And San Diego, they got out in front early in this one, but San Antonio stuck around, played some solid defense as they have done quite frequently this season. Trailed by just 7 at halftime. They turned San Diego over on downs to kick off the second half. That could have been the momentum shift that the Gunslingers needed to put some sort of upset bid in this one. But unfortunately for them, San Diego's defense getting back to that takeaway form that they've been so good at their best. They get a couple consecutive interceptions off Fred Payton Jr., while Nate Davis and Shane Hooks and the rest of that offense put it on in the game's final 30 minutes. In fact, 4 consecutive touchdown drives to close things out. And on the road, San Diego delivers. They keep pace with teams like Arizona and Vegas with a 48-36 road victory. So that plus 110 money line bet pays off for our 4th underdog win on the money line this season. So given where teams are converting at about 30% right now, like we'll see later as outright underdogs, we're doing very, very well on that front. So we'll have to see if there's opportunities this week for that to continue. Moving on to the next game of Saturday, we had Jacksonville at Fishers taking on the Freight. Now the Sharks, they started off a bit sluggish on this one. They allowed an opening touchdown. Callum Sutherland hit a deuce to add to his league-leading total. And then on the first play from scrimmage, James Cahoon is wrapped up in the end zone, tries to toss it away. It winds up being an intentional grounding. It forces a safety. So before any of us really had a chance to sit down with our game day meals or game day snacks in hand, the Freight already had an 11-point lead. That did not seem to matter for the Jacksonville Sharks, though, as they got key plays at key moments while employing a near perfect offense that saw both of their quarterbacks really outshine the bright lights in Fishers. We had James Cahoon toss for 5 touchdowns, Sammy Edwards rushing for 3 more. The Sharks defense getting a couple of key turnovers late, including an interception off of Felix Harper, along with a fumble recovery in the fourth quarter. By the time that fourth quarter came rolling around, the Sharks had opened it wide up. They actually match their season high total for a game with 68 points as they send Fishers to a third straight loss, 68-50. The final in that one, the Freight hitting a bit of a bumpy road here after a 5-1 start, dropping 3 straight. Meanwhile, the Sharks are swimming right along with win number 5 in a row. Final game of Saturday, the Green Bay Blizzard trying to keep their respective winning streak alive. Another tough environment to play in Tulsa, taking on the Oilers. Now, the home team in this one, they jumped out to a very strong start. The defense particularly impressive in this one. After giving up a couple touchdowns to Green Bay to start, they held Green Bay completely off the scoreboard in the second quarter. 4 empty possessions, 3 of them resulted in takeaways for the Tulsa defense. So the Oilers had a 7-point halftime lead. The Oilers had a touchdown to make it a 14-point lead. It looked like they were well on their way to a pretty shocking upset of the Eastern Conference's number 1 team right now. From that point on, though, Green Bay, they locked down and they delivered when they needed to. The offense chipping away with 1 touchdown drive after another. And the Oilers offense, we suddenly saw that timing get completely thrown off with some errant snaps, mistiming on some passes, blocked assignments on rushing attempts. And it was a struggle for the Oilers. You could see it. The eye test certainly pointed to the same result. And facing a 14-point second half deficit, Green Bay rallies to take this one by 6, ultimately covering, much to our dismay, with a 41-35 win in Tulsa. So another very close loss for the Oilers, as all 5 of their losses have come by 7 points or fewer. Green Bay, meanwhile, they get up to 5 straight wins with a record of 8-1 for their best start in the franchise's 20-plus year history. On Sunday, we had one standalone contest featuring the 2 teams at the bottom of their respective conferences in the standings. The Iowa Barnstormers heading to the road to take on the Northern Arizona Wranglers. And what an impressive outing this was for the previously winless Wranglers. Anthony Garrett in particular, you know what? The coaching staff let him sling the ball all over the yard, and he was able to deliver accurately and on time for the majority of the game. Ripping apart Iowa's defense with prime passes to guys like Kayron Ashley. Marlon Cook had a multi-touchdown outing. Manny Higuera booting through 3 deuces as part of an effort that led to him being named the IFL Special Teams Player of the Week last week. So this was a rejuvenating game for Northern Arizona, a rather disappointing game for the Iowa Barnstormers, who didn't really get much in the way of their passing game going. They got a couple big passes, both for touchdowns, and that was pretty much it. They had to rely exclusively on their running game, which did do reasonably well with over 150 yards rushing, but you got to have balance in this game in order to maximize your shot at winning. And for the Barnstormers, they sort of were reinforced to that lesson the hard way. Final score from Prescott Valley, the Wranglers 57, Iowa 33. Fun fact about this one, it is the first Northern Arizona non-conference game to make an over. It had been previously under in each of their first 6 against Eastern opposition. So we entered Monday with a bit of a 2-game losing streak here following 3 straight wins to kick off the week's action. At East Rutherford, New Jersey, the American Dream IFL Cup festivities getting underway with the matchup between Arizona and New Mexico. And wouldn't you know it, in this one, the Rattlers started out immediately with a kickoff return touchdown. Ron Brown Jr. getting the festivities underway. New Mexico punching back pretty quickly with a long pass from newcomer Harry Rubidoux to Demond Street. Unfortunately for the Chupacabras, that one play in the first quarter was pretty much their highlight of the afternoon. As one unfortunate mistake after another led to 6 combined turnovers that the Chupacabras suffered at the hand of the Arizona Rattlers. And furthermore, the Rattlers, with Drew Powell getting another start, they got points on all 9 of their possessions, and this one just became academic by the time that we got midway through the third quarter. Another monstrous outing for the Rattlers against maybe a bottom rung team, but they take care of business. 61-15 the final in that one. So they follow up a 52-point victory last week with a 46-point win over the weekend. They are now a plus 98 in their past 2 games leading up to next week's matchup, which was dependent on the second game of that day, a 7 o'clock kick between the Vegas Nighthawks and the Orlando Pirates. One of the more fascinating games in terms of flow that I think I've seen in the IFL in quite some time, because Orlando actually got a really good start here. Probably couldn't have scripted it up any better if you were head coach Rod Windsor. They score on their first drive, force an interception off Jaden DeLaura. They follow it up with a couple more touchdown drives from that point. So they have a 20-7 lead, and everything seemed to shift back in favor of the Nighthawks from that point. A Jaden DeLaura 35-yard touchdown run, sparking an effort that would then turn into a 66-13 game-ending run by the Nighthawks, who just seemed to completely overpower the Pirates, who were simultaneously running out of breath as well as personnel. They suffered quite a few injuries in this one, with players either shaken up or not able to come to the game, return to the game, or whatever the case was. This was just one of the more astonishing fall flat games from the Pirates that you'll really ever see. In total, the final score was 73-33. The Nighthawks crushing the Pirates, matching the single game high for a team this season, which San Diego got in their 73-59 win over Quad City about a month ago. So that result wrapped up our week with a loss. So we did end up with a positive week here. We went 4-3. Granted, one of our wins was that heavy favorite of Quad City on the money line, which only won by 2. But hey, progress is progress, and you got no right to complain at that point when you're winning more than you're losing, provided that you do provide that little bit of a challenge and going with something other than heavy favorites on the money line. But in any event, we are, for the first time this season, at a winning record overall, entering the next weekend of action. 27 wins, 26 losses. The big things that we're going to have to fix here are our underdog spread betting and our over selections. So we'll certainly have a bunch of opportunities there to correct that. And I feel like the underdog betting is going to turn around a little bit for us, because when I looked at it a little bit this week when I had the chance, 5 of those losses were within 1 possession. So you get that backdoor cover play on a couple of those, we're looking at a potentially 29-24 record or 30-23 record, just from improvement on that bet type alone. So we usually do our best on bets when we identify anomalies like that. So we'll hope for much of the same as we embark forward here with that in mind. Here is our parlay result from last week. Unfortunately, prolonged scoring droughts in that Green Bay-Tulsa game ultimately did us in. We needed at least 91 points. We only got 76 in the Green Bay win by final score of 41-35. A shame as well, considering that Northern Arizona beat out Iowa in that Arizona New Mexico game. Even though Arizona tried their hardest to make that total all by themselves, it did stay under with 76 points. 2 out of 3 on its own, pretty solid record, but unfortunately not good enough to cash a parlay attempt. So we now have 4 such weeks that went 2-1 just from this season alone, to add to our alarmingly high number of 2-for-3 attempts. So we'll try to put something together for the week ahead as well, but we'll see what happens. All right, here's an illustration of where we are at this point in the season. We have spent pretty much the majority of the year trying to break through into net gain territory. We've had a couple years now where it's kind of taken a little bit for us to break through. A couple years ago, 2024, was basically the entire season and a strong regular season finale to allow us to finally break through. But we haven't really been too high or too low. We've established a pretty solid model of consistency overall. Again, like we say each week, we're just trying to go 1-0 each game, positive record each week, and see where that takes us. All right, let's take a look at the population results so far for our games. And the first thing that you might notice here is that there's now a 2-game difference between the home and road splits and the favorites and underdog splits. And you're probably asking, hey, Alec, what gives about that? To which the response is, we had 2 games on Monday last week that, for all intents and purposes, were neutral site games. Now, I do understand the argument that there should be home teams for administrative purposes, regardless of where the game is being played. So if anybody out there in the comments feels strongly enough to where those should be included with these stats right here, let me know, state your case, and I will be sure to include them next week. But for now, from a practicality standpoint, I'm going to leave those couple games out. I'm going to leave the couple games out this week as well for the final 2 games of the IFL Cup. So when we sit down here and talk about these next week, that difference will jump up to 4 games. But again, the big trend this season, home teams, home teams, home teams, whether you're going with the spread or the money line. Pick out any given game from the 53 that we've played so far. There's at least a 64% chance that the home team won and or covered. Overs and unders are fairly consistent this season. From a league-wide standpoint, the number itself doesn't really seem to have too much of a drastic effect on the efficiency. As we've seen that discrepancy from 86.5 and 87.5 really narrow down within the past 4 or 5 weeks here. So we mentioned it last week, where our look at any point total bets moving forward are going to be based a little bit more off of team by team matchups than by just looking at the total and saying, hey, league wide, this is such and such. So home underdogs, we only had, I believe, 1 home underdog last week, which we tried to take. Unfortunately, Green Bay had other ideas in their comeback cover against the Oilers, but still, home underdogs, very strong this year. 14-6 against the spread, and a 9-11 straight up record as well, offering some pretty solid value there as well. Because keep in mind, these underdogs are going to be at least even money for the most part. So for those who are interested, I can look into that number a little bit further and see what exactly the ROI is on both the money line and the spread. To be honest, I'm pretty curious myself. All right, here are our team-by-team trends at this point in the season. And as you can see, some significant trends are starting to emerge. So the challenge at this point for the wondering mind like me, figure out, is it real or is it facade? So some notes on the spread here. We've got Vegas, an incredible form at 6-1 on the spread. They've actually covered in each of their last 6 games following their heartbreaking loss to Green Bay to begin the season. Speaking of the Blizzard, they've covered in 3 straight games. They are now 6-3 on the spread on the season. On the other side of the ledger, Quad City in a little bit of rough form, like we said before. They won last week, but still failed to cover. That is now 3 straight defeats against the spread for them. They are 3-6 on the handicap now, and the Gunslingers at 2-5 as well. Our over-under record, we mentioned it before. Orlando, still a perfect 7-0, with their games averaging over 108 points per game. Very clearly pacing the league in that category. Again, with one of the highest upside offenses and maybe the leakiest defense in the league right now. Perfect recipe for anybody taking the over in those games. We also have Fishers and San Diego very strong on the over-under front, while, again, the Gunslingers and the Steamwheelers seeing a bunch of their games make the under. So some very fascinating trends here. Do we see more of these results pan out, or do we see a little bit of an evening out with some of these? Those are questions that we're going to be answering once we reach those opportunities. And here are our results by team. We've got an opportunity on, I believe, one of these, or 2 of these actually, to make it to our goal of 7 wins already. With the Rattlers and the Gunslingers in action this week. Quad City is on a bye, so we're going to have to wait until next week to potentially push them into 7-win territory as well. Meanwhile, we have 4 other teams that we're looking to bridge that gap in that losing record. So we've got Jacksonville that we can look at. We've got New Mexico we can look at. Tulsa we can look at to figure out where has our thought process gone a little bit askew, and what can we learn from those defeats to eventually turn this thing around for us. So the one thing you'll notice here is that we've made at least 1 spread bet and 1 over-under bet on games involving all 14 teams so far. We may or may not play around with the money line for the 4 teams that we have yet to put a bet on. But we'll keep those in mind as we pace through the rest of the regular season here. All right, it is disclaimers time. The lines and odds that we're going to be using tonight are going to come from DraftKings Sportsbook. This is a series, as I've said before, that is purely rooted in fun, entertainment, and curiosity. This is not meant to be construed as a betting show or something to rely on to make money, because we know there's no such thing as a guarantee or a lock in the sports wagering world. With that said, if you would like to play along and play some wagers yourself, please do so responsibly. Make sure that you are of age to play in your jurisdiction. Most cases, you got to be 21 or older to do so. And again, if you would like to tail or fade my selections, practice safe gaming habits. That includes setting a budget in terms of both time and money. Risk only what you can afford to lose. And if you feel like you or a loved one is maybe teetering upon having an issue with problem gaming, or perhaps maybe that fear of addiction might be settling in, there are a lot of resources both online and issued by your respective state that specialize specifically in getting help in that matter, whether it's treatment plans or self-exclusion or just simply debunking the myths surrounding gambling, and getting some education that way. There's something for just about everybody here that feels like they're adversely affected by the concept of betting as a whole. Some examples that I refer to quite frequently here: haveagameplan.org. Responsibleplay.org is another one as well that I've seen advertised. So if you're in this boat, know that you are not alone and that help is available. And I encourage you to reach out if you feel like the situation's getting serious. All right, with that said, we've got our 5-game docket here, including our IFL Cup Championship, that highly anticipated rematch between the Nighthawks and the Arizona Rattlers. Let's go discuss these games. All right, there you have it. I'm going to do a quick refresh on this page just to make sure. Everything's staying the same here. Okay, so the first thing that you'll notice before we jump right in here is the fact that only 3 games at present are being made available on DraftKings. So the 2 that are missing here are the resulting IFL Cup games that were dependent on last week's results. So unfortunately tonight we won't be able to place wagers on the Chupacabra Pirates game or that Rattlers Nighthawks game, but we can at least discuss them, discuss some player and team trends of note, and maybe forecast what these things will wind up being once they're lined up. So if anybody out there is watching and you've got close ties to either DraftKings or the Indoor Football League, put in a good word. Help us out a little bit. Let's get these lines up and running here, folks. All right, so let's take what we have so far and talk about tonight's 8 o'clock Eastern game. This is Jacksonville at Iowa. The Sharks on the road, still with the heaviest favored number in the IFL this season, and the first time that we've had a 20-plus point spread since the 2023 campaign. At home, Iowa is getting 21 and a half. The over-under is set at 86 in the hook. If you're playing the money line here, Jacksonville is a 4-figure number, minus 1450. And if you're the Iowa Barnstormers, you can back them for plus 850. This game is all about whether the Sharks can keep up their current hot form. They have won 5 straight games while employing one of the best offensive and defensive units in the game. Clearly making case as arguably one of the most complete teams in the Indoor Football League. It starts with their quarterback, former Barnstormer James Cahoon, who played for these Barnstormers during the 2025 season in his rookie year. So we get a little bit of a hashtag revenge game narrative there. And really the Sharks offense, they're very similar to Green Bay in that with the players that come in and out of the lineup at any given time, regardless of who's in there, head coach Jason Gibson has done an exceptional job at putting those players in the best positions to succeed. And ultimately, to the players' credit, they have made the most of those chances. Whether you're looking at Jaden Stoshak, Jimmy Robinson, Sammy Edwards, Dylan May. I mean, the Sharks are just stocked with talented playmakers on both sides of the ball, or talented playmakers on that side of the ball. And defensively, they're getting contributions from veterans and emerging stars. Chris Rice and Chris Chekwinicki come to the top of my mind for veteran names. Michael Moore, linebacker, who won himself a Defensive Player of the Week nomination just a little while ago, along with Dylan Brown, very impressive defensive back that has made a number of plays this season. Jacksonville, there's not enough good that you can say about them right now. They've had their naysayers, but I think it's time to give them a little bit of respect if you're still in that boat. 5-1, or 6-1 rather, with 5 straight wins. And they'll put that on the line against an Iowa team that thought that they might have had a little bit of something going after their win against Quad City a little while back. But after that bye week, discouraging result at Northern Arizona. Ended up losing by 24. And the main thing that you look back on when reflecting on that game is how impressive Northern Arizona's defense was in completely silencing Iowa's passing game, forcing the Barnstormers to gain pretty much all of their offense exclusively with the run. Now, I will say for Iowa, at their best on the rushing front, they look like they have a pretty darn good tandem with Dante Avila Santos at quarterback, along with David Elder at running back, who remains one of the more underrated signings that any team has made throughout the midway point of this season so far. So that piece is in place. Now the next task for Iowa is to get their talented receivers involved. Curtis Ravenel, Donald McKinney, DeMonte Martin. There are a bunch of good players here that just unfortunately haven't had that opportunity for one reason or another to string together something consistent for a long stretch of time. The Iowa defense, they're going to be heavily tested here. They did a lot well against Quad City at home. So there could be a silver lining here in the fact that they are back in friendly confines. But yeah, guys like Austin Edmonds and Tyler Tate are going to have to continue to lead that effort, try to make some plays, force Cahoon into situations that he might not necessarily want to be in. Because we have seen Cahoon has had some accuracy questions throughout the past few games. So if you tap into that a little bit, maybe that could be part of Iowa's game plan for a potential upset bid. So my final pick for this game, I thought about this long and hard, but I'm going to track with the under here at 86.5. Now I know Iowa's game did make this number last week. It also made it a couple different times throughout last season, or this season rather, in some pretty wild finishes. I just have a hard time seeing Iowa necessarily keep pace here with a Jacksonville offense that's right up there with the likes of Vegas in terms of offensive efficiency. Just seeing any one of their players come through and contribute on a play-by-play basis. That 21.5 number is super, super scary regardless of which side that you're taking. In the case of the Jacksonville Sharks, betting history is kind of against them on this one, at least in terms of the spread. They are 2-5 ATS all time as road favorites. Meanwhile, for teams that are 21.5 point underdogs, which has only happened 5 times so far in the IFL's betting era, the underdog has come through and covered in 4 of those 5 games. And honestly, if you're Iowa, you can lose this game 51-31 and still be in that cover territory. Like, there is an insane amount of room for error here. And as long as we keep those oh no Iowa moments to a minimum, this should be very interesting to see how this pans out. It's definitely a lot of room to maybe facilitate a backdoor cover as well for those who are either optimistic or hesitant on that possibility playing out. But really what drives me to this number is perhaps foreseeing where Jacksonville views this game as an opportunity to get more of a traditional running game going. Jimmy Robinson, for as twitchy and talented as he is, has been kept largely in check as a pure rusher this season. Now, Jacksonville has done a really nice job of getting him involved as a receiver, with Robinson often coming through with 5 or more catches on a per game basis. So you kind of extend the run game a little bit that way. But I do see this as a great opportunity for the former Bethune-Cookman Wildcat to maybe turn some of those rushes into more efficiency, serving as a springboard to bring that next level to the Jacksonville attack. For Iowa, you know that they're going to continue to lean on that running game. It has been by far their most productive method of moving down the field. The question becomes whether they can turn those yards into scores, which to this point in their season, their largest in-game total, 39 points. So I've got my final score prediction of this one as Jacksonville 52, Iowa 31. So again, right at that 21.5 number. You're pretty much just looking for a blowout here if you're backing Jacksonville. And if you're looking for Iowa, maybe a good start gets you ahead by, maybe a 7-0 or a 10-7 lead. And then you're really sitting pretty where Jacksonville now has to make up 4 or even 5 possessions to threaten making the number. We've seen some games with some insane runs before, but this one's either going to need a mega run of like 28 or 29 or whatever unanswered points, or it's going to take a couple mini runs throughout the game where Jacksonville has like a 16-0 run in the first and then a 19-3 run in the third or fourth quarter or whatever. But for my pick here, we're going to continue relying on the fact that Iowa's offense might not be the best, most efficient in the league. And I do see where Jacksonville maybe gets smart about this game, preserve some of its talent in the receiving game to see this one through. So first game, give me Jacksonville, Iowa, under 86.5. For tomorrow's games, we've got the Tulsa Oilers and the San Antonio Gunslingers. This one is our first game of the season to feature an even number spread. San Antonio getting exactly a field goal from the odds makers here. The over-under is 74.5. That is the second lowest all-time in an IFL game, by the way. For the money line, Tulsa is minus 148 and San Antonio plus 124. Now, these are two teams currently below 500 in desperate need of a victory to stay true as a fringe playoff contender. For the Oilers, the story of the season has been the small mistakes adding up, leading to some pretty close losses on a game-to-game basis. We said it before, maximum margin of defeat for the Oilers this season, 7 points. It's really just been a matter of stringing together that full 60-minute effort for them. We've seen them do it once already against the San Diego Strikeforce, and we saw them edge out a 29-22 season opening win against these same gunslingers. So for the Oilers, they've got a bunch of talent both sides on the ball. Offensively, TJ Edwards, Caleb Ramseur, the new running back, Jerminic Smith, Spencer Tears. There are high upside pieces there. And unfortunately, it just hasn't translated to the consistency that they've been looking for to push to being a top 5 team in the league. Defensively has been a little bit of an adventure, some on and off throughout each game and throughout the season. But Ulrich Jones is back with the team. Trey Harvey spearheading the secondary, as well as filling in at linebacker when needed. And guys like Za'Darius Doss in the secondary are also capable of bringing the big play, the big takeaway in prime opportunities. So that's a little bit of a look at the Tulsa Oilers against their rival, against whom they've won each of their last 4 games in this all-time series. San Antonio, very interesting season for them. We were entering the season looking at, what do we know about the Gunslingers? What do we don't know about the Gunslingers? But what we've quickly come to learn from them is that their defense is no slouch. They're led by guys like Terry Beckner Jr. on the defensive line, Riverius Rivers in the secondary. They're allowing the second fewest points per game in the league. Second most efficient defense in the IFL in that category as well. And they've already had a game this year, limiting Tulsa to 29 points. The big question surrounding the Guns, that offense. They've had a mix of Fred Payton Jr. and Joaquin Collazo, really trying to figure out who gets the hot hand at the most opportune time. But with an injury to Collazo, it looks like the job is Fred Payton's, at least for the time being. And while he has been able to come up with the big play, especially with his legs from time to time, it's been some of those inopportune turnovers like interceptions, fumbles lost, that have really prevented this Guns offense from reaching the level that they feel like they could play at under head coach Jonathan Bain. You look across that skill position group, you got some pretty good players. You got Smith at running back, Upshaw at wide receiver, Glenn Gibbons Jr. Emerging as the number 1 receiving threat as part of that group. So for San Antonio, this is about getting right back on the horse and bringing their season back to an even 500. Will they be able to do it against a team that's had their number throughout the past year plus? My pick for this game, and this is kind of taking advantage of a situation here that we don't really get to capitalize on all that often. I've got the +3 here for San Antonio. And again, this is really an illustration of the difference between 2.5 and 3 is massive as far as the betting front, because when push comes to shove in this game, and let's say Bailey Hale wins it for the Oilers, they get the game-winning field goal, 37-34 final, or whatever it pans out to be, we can at least collect some of our money back with that result pushing in the event that Tulsa wins by exactly 3 points. That is a situation that would not happen with a spread of 2.5. So I say we capitalize on it here. We lean upon the league-wide trend of underdogs at home being 14-6 against the spread so far this season. So even though San Antonio hasn't been the best team on their own in terms of covers, I say we give this one a little bit of a shot here. Their defense, like we said before, plays at an elite level to where as long as the offense is kind of pulling their weight, this should result in a pretty solid chance to see this one through here. And to be honest, I feel like San Antonio has a better than not shot to win this game. I actually have them as a 1.5 favorite here, just looking at the metrics alone. So let's go home dog once again. It once again involves a Tulsa Oiler game, so I don't know exactly how to feel about that, but we're going to go with it and see what happens. San Antonio +3 to kick off Saturday. All right. Saturday's finale, a 10 o'clock game, even though it says 9 o'clock right here. We've got the Northern Arizona Wranglers against the San Diego Strike Force. This game is favoring San Diego. They are laying 8.5. The over-under is 86.5. On the money line, Northern Arizona +220 and San Diego -270. This is the second matchup between these two teams this season, with the first one, I believe, in March, also at Front Wave Arena, with San Diego taking that one 42-40. We live in a much different world now than we did just a couple months ago, though. No longer Ramon Atkins-Frazier at quarterback for the Wranglers. It is rookie Anthony Garrett, who is set to make his third start in the IFL, and this will be his first test on the road. So it's going to be very fascinating to see how the youngster plays in a hostile environment. We've seen that Wrangler offense. We saw what they could do. Granted, it was against Iowa's defense, so you got to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. But those doubts that we had with Garrett as a passer leading up to that game, I'd say there's no concerns there. No doubt Garrett can sling the ball. The question becomes, against a playoff caliber defense like the Strike Force, can he continue to deliver those passes accurately and on time, and above all else, stay away from trouble as far as turnovers go? Because we know how great this Strike Force defense is at forcing that issue in that regard. So the Wranglers continue to build upon what they have on offense. Benji Omayebu has really made some impact on offense as well as special teams, while receivers like Kayron Ashley and Marlon Cook have really stepped up as leaders with that position group. Manny Higuera, like we said before, very good kicker with booting through field goals, deuces, IFL Special Teams Player of the Week last week. So for the first time this season, Northern Arizona's got a little bit of momentum. So that's something that the Strike Force are going to have to watch out for a little bit here. Now, San Diego did win last week. They were on the road against San Antonio. They come back for their first home game in quite a while. So they'll certainly welcome the boost that the home crowd provides them. That Nate Davis offense, it's got its upsides. It's got great players, Eddie Vander, Shane Hooks, Cole Blackman. I think the number one priority here for San Diego is going to be ball security, because we've seen them a little bit turnover prone through stretches this season. So you don't really want to give a sneakily good Northern Arizona defense any sort of momentum to try to stage a bit of an upset bid here. So let's dive in. Let's make a pick for this game. The last time that we had this particular matchup, we went with the under. It flamed out on us with under 30 seconds to go. I'm going back to that well. I'm going back to it. Under 86.5. This is actually 9 points higher than the week 2 matchup between these two teams. So we've got a lot more wiggle room to kind of give us a little bit of a cushion. This really comes down to my belief in San Diego's defense being able to neutralize Garrett's dual threat ability. And what's going to be, like we said, Garrett's first start on the road. So the Wranglers were able to figure out some things in their past couple games at home. How well does that carry outside of Prescott Valley? From a matchup-based standpoint, this pick actually makes a lot of sense too. You look back at the 8 meetings these teams have had since 2023, the average game, about 82.1 points per contest, which is right where that week 2 matchup this year wound up. In a game that had some pretty healthy tempo, by the way. So we don't have to necessarily worry about, oh, that game only had, 8 or 9 possessions per team. I think both ended up getting 11 possessions in that game. But in any event, we're going to go with the second consecutive, or a second under at 86.5 for the week. So for now, those are our 3 definitive picks for the week ahead. So I guess now we'll talk a little bit about Sunday's games. So we will pivot things over back to me on the full screen here. And let's talk about game number 1 of the IFL Cup Sunday festivities, the consolation game, if you want to call it that, between the New Mexico Chupacabras and the Orlando Pirates, set for a 12 o'clock Eastern kick, where the winner can say that they got third place in a 4-team mini tournament. For the Chupacabras, they pivoted over to a new quarterback. They traded Jerome Johnson a couple weeks ago and brought along Harry Rubidoux as their starter, with Rubidoux having spent some time earlier this season as the starter for the Iowa Barnstormers. So certainly some passing game acumen that he's shown, but like with most youngsters that we've seen in the league, there have been some pretty spotty mistakes as well. In fact, in Northern Arizona's last game, which saw Rubidoux make his debut, there were 6 Chupacabra turnovers, including 4 interceptions. Actually, 5 interceptions, with Portery throwing one as well. So the big thing that New Mexico has to figure out right now is getting that offense together, which also features guys like James White, Damon Street, CJ Jefferson, even Isaiah Crocker has come out and made some pretty solid plays as well. So those opportunities to make big plays, they've been hard to come by for New Mexico. Might that turn around, though, in a matchup against an Orlando defense that has been not great? That Pirate franchise has always established itself on the heels of elite defense, but this year has been a very, very different story. Dead last in the league in points allowed per game, right around the 57 point per game mark, I believe, last I checked. That makes it tricky to win any game in this league. But for the Pirates, they're hoping that a matchup against the last ranked offense in the IFL starts a little bit of a turnaround. Paxton DeLaurent still having a very impressive rookie season despite his struggles last week, along with the rest of the team in their 40-point loss against Vegas. But it's still an offense that is very heavy pass base that's looking to take the top off of a defense. The Pirates already do have a win this season on the road against New Mexico, 41-38 in what was both teams' season opener. So the Pirates are looking to make it 2 in a row against the novel New Mexico franchise. So, what I'm expecting to see once lines drop, if they do drop, is for the Pirates to be favored in this game. I would anticipate either a 7.5 to an 8.5 point spread, with the over under for this game set somewhere around the low 90s. I'm thinking anywhere between 90.5 and 93.5. Because bear in mind, even with New Mexico's offense having their fair share of struggles, those Orlando overs are a perfect 7-0. So for the bookies, you're looking at, what is that sweet spot number that straddles that divide between those that think, hey, Orlando overs are going to go 8-0, or hey, do we have our first Orlando under? So once those lines are out, we'll be able to answer those questions. Before we get to the Arizona Vegas game, we've got Chucky Valentine hopping on, chiming in the chat. Thanks for hopping on, man. Tulsa Gunslingers over 74.5. How do you feel about it? Man, I'm torn on it from a purely contextual standpoint on how IFL games operate. I typically tend to lean on the over in scenarios like this. The big downside here is that, San Antonio's defense is no slouch, right? They've limited Tulsa to 29 points earlier this season. In that last matchup, that only got to 51 points total. That's kind of like the matchup-based argument that would seem to support the under here. But for those who like the over, look, this is 11 touchdowns. If each team gets their usual 11 possessions per game, you're just looking for half of those possessions to wind up as touchdowns. And I don't think that's a completely unreasonable ask. And kind of in that same line of thinking, too, you've got games where it's like, these teams are consistently getting short fields. Like you could have drives start at the plus 20 or plus 15 yard line, right? Let's say maybe a good kick return, or the kickoff goes off the up man, and then the kicking team or the receiving team recovers deep in the kicking team's territory. So from just a possibility of what could happen in an indoor football game, there are a ton of opportunities for points. So if I were to pick one of the two between the over and the under, I'd probably lean towards the over. But I would be prepared to see a scenario where both teams don't even get to 40 and you wind up with like a 37-34 game. If we get 40-35, you're there. But again, it's trying to straddle that really, really thin line. So hopefully that provides a little bit of an answer to your question there. And again, thank you so much for hopping on. All right, let's wrap things up here with our final game of the IFL Cup, the championship game at 7:30 Eastern on Yahoo Sports. Arizona at Vegas. The highly anticipated rematch that everybody is expecting. And a lot of people out there are probably thinking, if the halftime show does not contain Kevin Guy and Mike Davis in a boxing ring for 15 rounds, what are we doing? But maybe the more conservative minds are thinking, hey, that physicality that we saw kind of after the whistles? Let's put that in between the whistles and get a pretty clean game as far as disciplinary action and all that. But hey, when push comes to shove, these are two of the best teams in the Western Conference right now. They're probably the best teams in the Western Conference. They are number 1 and number 2 in the standings after all, with each of them in the top 4 in the league in pretty much every offensive and defensive category that you can think of. So this very clearly will be the best of the best in the primetime lights. Pretty much exactly what the league was looking for. The big thing for Arizona, that shift to Drew Powell as the starting quarterback for each of their last 2 games. employing more of a rush heavy attack, getting him involved with Kimani Clark and Ron Brown Jr., while the receiving game has been kind of more like that secondary supplementary option to move in the offense. But we have gotten some pretty big games out of Trey Odom's Dukes, along with Corey Reed, Keenan Hambrick getting some game action as well. So really, regardless of who's behind center right now for Arizona, it's really 50-plus point upside that they have any given week. You pair that with the defense that's been very, very good. They've got Hayden Hatcher at linebacker. Karlvansky DeCius has had an outstanding rookie season, among the league leaders in interceptions. So the Rattlers, they're playing their best ball right now at perhaps the best time to be doing so, because now they get that rematch against the Vegas Nighthawks, against whom they lost by 14 points in the previous game. Nighthawks, they didn't have Quentin Randolph last week. We'll have to see if he winds up returning this week. But even without him, they put up 73 points last week. Jaden DeLaura, again, having another outstanding season, definitely deserving in consideration for league MVP honors, depending on how that race shakes out with a few other signal callers. And not to be lost in the rotation, that defense, outstanding, with guys like Lorenzo Hernandez, Clifton Duck. They've just had guys all over just ball out. Big reason for why they're 6-1 right now. You got Chucky hopping on again, saying he's a huge Rattlers fan, but the Hawks are rolling right now. To be honest with you, both teams are. And this seems to be effectively a coin flip, right? Where a lot of what we're going to be looking at as far as predictions and things like that are going to stem from what these lines are set at. I foresee Vegas here being favored. I could see them favored by as many as 6.5, with the over-under for this game set possibly somewhere in the mid-90s. Think 94.5 to 96.5. The other unique thing to factor here, too, when it comes to the point total, is the way that the arena is structured. Because you may have noticed if you watched any of the couple games from this past Monday, they've done away with the uprights in favor of that cup zone. So basically that colored in netting, where if the ball hits any point of that net on a kick, it's ruled good. So think of it in a very similar vein to the ABS strike zone that we've seen in Major League Baseball, making its debut this year. So does that make it a little bit easier for kickers to maybe knock through some field goals, booting through some deuces? Because we did see a very healthy handful of kicks go through that netting in the first day of IFL Cup action. So maybe that argument propels the total up even further to maybe 97. But then again, the first meeting between these two teams, we got 98 points. So we do have a little bit of a baseline there. Where again, our prediction is going to be based on, whatever numbers those are set at. The big trend that I have in my mind leading up to this game, and I'm kind of kicking myself for maybe not capitalizing on it sooner, is Vegas's streak of just pure domination. Ever since they dropped that game in Green Bay as a result of that late fumble that kind of cost them, they've covered in every single one of their games. And in a lot of those, they've been double-digit favorites, including against these same Rattlers. So as long as the spread is a reasonable number, I do have to ride a little bit with Vegas. And another question here from Chucky. Do you know if they'll drop lines from the IFL Cup games? Your guess is as good as mine, man. I've been kind of screaming into the void on social media for the IFL and DraftKings to kind of get on their game with this. Typically, when lines have been released, they've put out all the games at once. So in this week's case, I think it happened to be Tuesday afternoon sometime. when the lines for the first 3 games dropped. Now, it is possible that the fact that these couple matchups were dependent on matchups prior had something to do behind the scenes. Then again, I don't work with DraftKings. I don't work with Bet365, so I can really only speculate at this point. I'm hoping that they come out either later tonight or maybe tomorrow. I know personally I will be out of town tomorrow, making the trip to New Jersey in preparation for those couple of games on Sunday, which unfortunately lines aren't carried over in New Jersey. So I might need a little bit of help from some outside resources to end up retrieving those. So I do think they get dropped eventually. I just don't know when. Again, your guess is as good as mine there. So with all that said, in the spirit of kind of keeping things alive with some of our 3-leg parlay attempts that we've put together here, you know what? We do have 3 options available here, and we can't wait forever for the league and the books to provide the other games. Even though I so badly want to potentially sweat this winner in person in the mall, we kind of have to make an executive decision here and kind of go with the 3 games that we have in order to really put together an attempt here. So starting with the Jacksonville, Iowa game. I don't feel strongly about this, but I'm going to take Iowa at plus 21.5. We mentioned the historic arguments kind of in favor of this already, where Jacksonville's record as favorites against the spread is very underwhelming, just 2-5. Along with the fact that underdogs of 21 or more are 4-1 against the spread. There are a wide range of outcomes here where Iowa does get blown out by the letter of the law, but still do manage to cover here. Like 52-32 would be fine. 49-31 would be perfectly fine. Really, you're just hoping for some semblance of a strong enough showing by Iowa on both sides of the ball to where they can keep this game within 3 touchdowns. So we're going to go with league history on this one. Even though Jacksonville is playing exceptionally well right now, I don't know, something different about this game being in Des Moines. You know, Iowa's had a handful of games over the past few years where they've been deceptively strong once they get into their barn at Casey Center. So we'll play that as our first of our 3 legs here. The second one that we're going to go with, I'm going to take a little bit of chalk here and go Tulsa at minus 148. Now, there is a cushion within the range of outcomes where we can actually get both this pick and our San Antonio +3 main game pick correctly. And that would be in the result of an Oilers victory by 1 or 2 points. Technically 3 as well if you consider the possibility of a push. But by making this wager, we basically have all of our bases covered on this game. It's very likely that either the single game pick or the parlay winds up flaming out because of this selection. But I do feel it is justified to kind of play this a little bit here. Like we said earlier, Tulsa does seem to have the number in this matchup recently. They have won each of the last 4 against the Gunslingers. I believe including 3 of those at Freeman Coliseum. So this is whatever allows Tulsa to view Freeman Coliseum as a friendly venue. They've done it pretty well in this particular matchup in the past year plus. So we'll see if Tulsa can turn it around, get to 3 wins on the season. And in our Northern Arizona San Diego game, I'm going to go with the Strike Force at minus 8.5. My model actually has San Diego favored by anywhere between 10 and 11 points in this one. Maybe that factors in the first few weeks of the Wranglers under Ramon Atkins a little bit too heavily. But I do still view the Strike Force as a superior team here. They would have actually had this number in their previous matchup as well, had it not been for a late Northern Arizona touchdown to cut the game back to 2 points. So this is another home team cover situation as well, where we've seen teams go 33-18 as the hosts against the spread. So we do lean upon that trend twice, as a matter of fact, here, along with taking a favorite to win, which has converted on 70% of games this season. So by the numbers, we have a pretty solid parlay constructed here. With time kind of running out on us, I will make this my official attempt of the week, where a $10 wager would return $61.07 if all of these go our way. So again, if you want to tail this parlay, join me in my quest to go 2 parlay wins in the last 3 attempts. We're going a little bit bold here with Iowa at plus 21.5, Tulsa at minus 148 outright, and San Diego minus 8.5. To cap it off, we're offered better than 5-1 odds on this, $10 into $61.07. All right, that is going to do it for tonight's episode of Wager Wednesday. I want to thank you all again for hopping on. Chucky, thanks for joining me in some great IFL talk. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We've got about 45-ish minutes to go until the game kicks off on overnight between Jacksonville and Tulsa. So do what you got to do before then. Order your food, get your man cave figured out, do whatever you got to do as we kick off the week with Jacksonville against Iowa. For those of you who will be placing bets this week, I'm going to wish you the very best of luck. And as always, I will see you at the cashier. Have a great night, everybody. Have an awesome Memorial Day weekend.